Welcome to RuralStrong, where we talk real challenges and bold solutions in rural economic development. I'm your host, Joe Barker. Let's get into it. Welcome to RuralStrong. This is Joe Barker, your podcast host, coming to you today from the Southwest Tennessee Development District podcast studio in beautiful downtown Jackson, Tennessee. And we have a great guest today from the great state of Colorado, Lewis Marchino. Laura, good to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm excited to be doing my first podcast.
Well, this is going to put you into the podcast Hall of Fame, I'm sure. We're just so excited to have Laura because she is an experienced economic development director. She's actually executive director of the Region 9 Economic Development District of Southwest Colorado, a position she has held since 2016. She has worked in community and economic development since 2000. She has a BA in journalism and mass communications, an MBA, and is a certified economic developer. Laura serves on several boards, including the National Association of Development Organization, chairs the Colorado Association of Regional Organization, and serves on the Southwest Colorado Accelerator for Entrepreneurs. She recently completed 8 years on the Economic Development Council of Colorado Board of Directors and was the chair in 2021. We have made a concerted effort on RuralStrong to bring in economic development professionals from across the country and to hear about what's going on in their region and some innovative things that they're doing. So let's just start, Laura, by telling our audience a little bit about the Region 9 Economic Development District and the citizens you serve.
Thank you, Joe. So Region 9 covers 5 counties in southwest Colorado. Joe, I know, visited just outside our region several years ago. It is definitely a tourism destination. Tourism and outdoor recreation are our number one industry. So we have all the benefits and challenges of that. If any of you are coming to Colorado, we're in the Four Corners area. Our population's about 100,000, and we have amazing cultural and natural assets. 2 national monuments, Chimney Rock and Hoven Weep, and we also have Mesa Verde National Park. Those are kind of what put us on the map. But in terms of our communities, we have 10 cities and towns in our region, 100,000 population, very geographically isolated from each other, very mountainous terrain, and that brings its own challenges. It's a lot more expensive to do broadband and highways, when you have mountains. So that's a little bit about the region.
Tell us a little bit, Laura, about how your organization works to meet those challenges.
Well, the neat thing about our region is we get to do a lot of economic development, kind of boots on the ground work that a lot of regional organizations or councils of governments or associations of governments, whatever you call them, get to do. So not only do we get to do regional programs that cross county lines, and I mentioned transportation, broadband, we also look at housing, and I'll put a pin in, we are actually administering our opioid settlement dollars, which I can talk about if there's interest. But we get to work with each of our communities with kind of that traditional economic development where we're working on business retention, expansion, all of those pieces, because only 2 of our 10 cities and towns have actual economic developers as staff, and then we have county economic development offices. So we actually meet with everyone quarterly and try to figure out where they need capacity, how we can help them, how we can help train them, because nobody goes into this business to be an economic developer, or I should say, no one goes to school to be an economic developer. You kind of evolve into that job. So we want to strengthen our communities, and having good people doing this economic development work is really step one.
So, Laura, in those, say, counties or cities that do not have a paid economic development professional, does Region 9 take the lead, or do you partner with the leadership there? How does that work?
Well, our board of directors includes all of the governments. So we kind of have that starting point where we see really what each community needs and how we can help. And I guess I describe it in rural, if you think of economic development as a pyramid or a triangle, the cherry on top is business recruitment. And that's what all our communities want. Bring in new business, bring in that 200 person new factory, manufacturing job, etc. And in our regions, when we have towns as small as 235, and our largest community is 10,000, that's really hard to do. So I feel like we're doing a lot of education, and when you look at the bottom of the pyramid, that's the foundational pieces that we do a ton of work in, which is infrastructure. Making sure we can actually bring in a business and they'll have water and sewer infrastructure, or broadband. So we start in that foundational bottom of the pyramid with all of our communities. And if that's what they need, that's where we work with them on, getting grants for sewer systems, whatever that looks like. And then the middle of the pyramid is all of that business development work of businesses that are already in your communities. How do we get these tiny towns to add one employee per business? Then we don't have to worry about attracting some large company. We can just kind of strengthen our community through economic gardening, if you're familiar with that term.
Sure. Well, I know on the pyramid chart that you're referring to, one of the foundational pieces is leadership development, and that's a passion of mine, is developing the leadership capacity in our community. So how do y'all work through leadership development in your communities?
We focus on what we can control.
Sure.
We do provide training for our electeds, not in terms of how to do their job as electeds, but economic development, and showing them the pyramid, and then talking about the different organizations they may have in their community that work in some of these areas, like a chamber, if they have that, or a downtown business group. And then we work with them through our CEDS, which is, our comprehensive economic development strategy. And we look at what their priority projects are, and we consider that kind of our starting point. And then, of course, we do have actual training for our economic development professionals in each of these communities or counties, because we want to grow their skills.
Sure. Would you agree that, as communities try to start the economic development process, that one of the keys is doing an asset-based plan? I've always said that no matter how small or how large your community is, every community has assets they can build on, and I just believe that when you first identify what your assets are, then you can move forward with other things to develop that economic development structure.
Yes, and there's a few strategies that we work with in our communities, and they really work in rural, which is kind of why we focus on them. You've probably heard of place-based economic development. Sure. But, if you have this tiny town and they don't have a lot of assets or capacity, we always start with the why are people in your community? and you want to build communities that people want to live in, and I always think of a community as like a sports team. You want everyone in your community to love your team, and be kind of an advocate for your community. And win or lose, it doesn't always turn out well, a project or, things happen. And so it's why did someone pick that community? And it may be because their family was there or a job was there, but it may be really intangible that they like, what it looks like, or they like to be able to mountain bike outside their backyard or fish or, whatever that is. And so that asset based to me is like figuring out not just what assets you have, but why are people choosing you over the neighboring community? And those are the things you really want to preserve.
Absolutely, and most of our communities, have a charm about them, have an attraction to them, and we all need to tap into that. If you could maybe name the top one or two challenges that you see for your region when it comes to economic development, what would it be?
Ooh, let's see. I would say for our rural area, it tends to be a lack of diversity in industry or even in people. Um, we don't have a lot of ethnic diversity in some of our communities. And then there's a lot of reliance on like one industry, say it's tourism. So if you have a bad year of tourism, it really can negatively impact the community because there's not other industries that can kind of fill the gap, if that makes sense.
Sure, sure. Uh, could you think of maybe an innovative project or an innovative program from your region that maybe you could share with our listeners?
Oh, well, I have a little tiny idea just for those really rural communities out there. And then kind of one that we work on regionally, which I sort of alluded to before. But our tiny example is we really try to work with communities on what do you have that can make you unique, unlike anyone else. How do you stand out? And we have one of our towns, it's Silverton. It's in San Juan County, 700 people. They are extremely reliant on the Durango and Silverton Railroad, tourism traffic in the summer. So they're very seasonal. And in the winter, they have a lot of businesses that board up and, don't open in the winter because it's not worth it. They're over 9,000 feet. There's a lot of snow. A lot of folks aren't just driving through, so to speak. And they did, just to beautify their community, instead of allowing businesses to just board up windows, they actually started using local art, and they developed window clings of artists' work in the windows of these empty buildings. So it's become like this beautiful kind of downtown art project. And then there's a little QR code at the bottom where you can figure out what artist it is. So they're promoting local art in a very, very economical and beautiful manner. So that's something that a tiny town of 700 could do. So I just love that.
Oh, I do too. In fact, I talked this week with the mayor and city manager from a rural town here in Tennessee, and they had done something very similar, and it had really transformed their downtown. So, there's a lot of innovative things that are going on out there. Let's talk a little bit, Laura, about you mentioned the opioid settlement that many of the regional organizations have become involved in working with those funds. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the opioid settlement funds in Region 9.
Sure. And I know this may look different in different states, but in the state of Colorado, when all the opioid settlements, and they continue to come in, those funds come from the feds to the state, and then the state decides how they disperse them. A lot of states are just putting the money out by county, and it has to be used for substance treatment. It has to
Sure.
include opioids, but all sorts of treatment or recovery or education programs. In our area, they actually gave money to all of our communities through a formula and to the regions. So in our rural region, the region got money and all 17 of our government jurisdictions. One thing I did forget to mention is we have the only 2 tribal nations in Colorado in our region. So we also work closely with our tribes. And Colorado required us to do a regional council to manage these funds. And so our regional organization got tapped to be the regional council because we already had that, board of electeds and governments in place. So we basically kind of just formed sort of a advisory committee of that with representation called SWORD, which is Southwest Opioid Response District. It was kind of one of those, we need an acronym people will remember, and of course, there's a lot of those out there. So SWORD basically voted all of the members to put all of their money into a regional pot to have the biggest impact. And so they all, I guess I'm just so proud of the fact that they all felt like, what can we do that's going to have the biggest impact with these one-time funds, even though we're getting them for the next 15 years. But, the communities were joking, you can have my $200 a year, let's put it in a bigger pot. And so we did a feasibility study, and we have no treatment facilities in our area for any substance misuse, abuse type of projects. We have to go to urban areas for treatment. But when we looked at that, that was not feasible. And so we looked at, okay, what's the next biggest thing we can do if we can't do treatment? And so we have put our eggs in the basket of doing a recovery residence campus, and we're modeling it after a model in Kentucky, where basically it's levels of peer-led, recovery support. So it's kind of based a little bit on AA, but you also will have components for folks with higher needs that might need methadone or some medical, support. And basically, it provides supportive housing where we're getting folks that have been sober and we want to keep them sober. And the economic development link for me is we want to get them back in the workforce.
Absolutely.
We're not making more babies. We're aging, and we have a lot of people that could be working that have all these barriers. And if we can reduce these barriers, it's going to benefit our region in so many ways.
So have you been in this project long enough to actually see some positive results?
Well, we're still looking to actually find land and get an operator developer for the facility. So we're only in like year 2 or 3. So it's not built yet. It's still a vision and a dream. But we're in for the long haul for this one, and we just feel like it's going to be such an impactful use of opioid dollars.
Well, that's fabulous, and I agree with you. It's encouraging that all your member governments decided to go together and work together on this very important project. And as we're talking about workforce and trying to get these folks the assistance they need to get them back in the workforce, are you seeing out there something we're seeing in our area is the lack of child care has really had an effect on a lot of our citizens going back into the workforce. Do you see that in Colorado?
Most definitely. Colorado's pretty high cost of living state, and we're seeing that incomes are not matching, the cost of living, the cost of housing. I know that's kind of a nationwide problem as well. We have been working with several of our counties to look at childcare. The county in which Durango, our largest city, is located, and where we're based, did a childcare strategy and planning process. And a lot of our communities are looking at allocating lodgers tax, not just for tourism and visitors, but allocating some towards housing and childcare and roads. And all of our communities are having those discussions because our legislature now allows for lodgers tax, which typically went, for visitor attraction, to be used for these kind of community development needs, which we'll see how that goes.
Well, it's a real challenge, and we're seeing now. This is mainly, of course, with some larger companies that have come into our region in the last 3 or 4 years. That many of these companies, as part of their strategy, are building child care facilities on site to attract workers. Are you seeing that in Colorado?
We are not, and I don't know if that's because right now everyone still seems focused on housing for workforce. Speaking for our region, we are seeing a decline in a lot of our schools because families can't afford to stay in our more tourist-based communities, and that's a problem because not only are we aging, but folks that tend to be older and have more money are the ones who want to live in our beautiful communities, and yet we need the workers. And in a tourist economy, those service jobs tend to be the lowest paying. So we're just seeing that, and we haven't figured out a good way to address it yet.
Well, and you definitely live in a beautiful area of the country. Let's touch a little bit on something you mentioned earlier, and particularly about your smaller communities, and that's entrepreneurship, about growing your own businesses. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that, and maybe how your organization plugs into that part of economic development.
I'm so glad you asked, because some of the things that we are struggling with is not building that entrepreneurial ecosystem. And what we're seeing is that we are getting our young people that are moving here or are staying here. If they can't find a job, they want to create one. And so we're trying to make sure all those supports are in place, from accelerators, from, Small Business Development Center, Apex Accelerator, Manufacturer's Edge, all of these support programs. And even if they're statewide and not located in our community, our job at Region 9 is to make sure that we connect them. But we do have one amazing success story, and that was SCAPE, which is the Southwest Colorado Accelerator for Entrepreneurs. SCAPE started 10 years ago in our region under our organization. And what we started with was, how can we get some of these wealthy retirees to invest in local business startups, kind of an angel fund. And that became really successful, and it grew into more of an investment fund. So we can get as low as $5,000 per whoever wants to be a qualified investor. And we do a fund every year, and businesses that have a unique product or service that's in the startup early phase, we provide some seed capital for them, but we also require them to do some mentoring and, a lot of classes around different areas of business. And those investments have led to larger investments. And we actually have 2 companies that have gone, that have been bought out by public companies, paying back the investors tenfold. Our organization donates, well, it's not really a donation, I guess, $20,000 a year in the investment fund every year, and we don't get to decide what businesses get it. We'd have to trust that Scape is doing a good job. They'll give 30,000 to one business, or what have you. And the investment funds are anywhere between $120 to $200,000. And so they decide what businesses, and they can do repeat businesses. They just have to be businesses that are scalable, or gazelles. And it's been phenomenally successful. And I recommend, if anyone is interested in that, goscape.org is the website. And it's been a tremendous success, even for a rural region.
Well, in those businesses that are grown from the ground up in a community, they're the businesses that I've seen that tend to support the community and become very involved in the community, and I congratulate you and your organization. That's a tremendous story and great work. I want to, in just a couple of minutes we've got left, and for our listeners, you can hear by listening to this that Laura is a great communicator, and I've had the opportunity of serving on a board with her for a few years, and one of the questions I get a lot, Laura, is how do you get the community engaged? And to me, community engagement is so important for the success of any project you're working on. So if you could give some advice to our listeners out there on the best ways to get community engagement, what would that be?
That's an interesting question, because communities are so different. But what we have found really works is going with that community momentum. So you mentioned childcare. If there is a community that is really worried about childcare and that's what they want to focus on, do it, because you're going to get a lot more done. You may sit there and think, oh, but broadband is such a big issue. But if they all want to work on childcare, why are you trying to work on broadband, as a concerted effort? So I felt that would be my number one, is in each community, what is your priority that you want to work on? Is it, opioid treatment, whatever it is, housing, and then be adaptable and flexible and just make things happen with that. And the next year it'll be broadband or something else.
Sure.
That's probably my number one advice.
Well, it's been a pleasure today to have Laura Lewis Marchino as the guest on RuralStrong. And Laura, for some of our listeners that have maybe have some interest in some of the programs that Region 9 is involved in, do you have a website that they could go to where they could contact you to get more information?
I would love that. Our website is region9, number 9, edd.org.
Well, be sure and contact them if you have any questions, and we would appreciate your comments on our RuralStrong podcast. You can email us at ruralstrong@gmail.com. Laura, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you, and everyone have a great day. Thanks for joining us on RuralStrong. If you found this helpful, share it, and follow the show for more insights from rural leaders making a real difference. Until next time, stay rural strong.